That's what he did. And Erwin Lutzer goes on to say, you can recognize some of these same changes taking place in America today.
Oh, yes.
Yes. If the Christian ethic is removed, all that is good in the welfare state will be removed too. You know, and we just talked about that just before church services started today, how taking God out of the schools and out of our society has turned society upside down. And we see the results of people going and massacring people in schools, children in schools like that. We see that. Christianity was banned from the state. Well, he goes on, it happened in Germany. Christianity was banned from the state. The gas chamber became the end of the aged or the old people. The poor, the sick were used for medical experiments. The Jews were tortured and died by the thousands because they took Jesus Christ out of their society. That's what happens when you take Jesus or God out of the society, doesn't it? Well, in our lesson today, we have a happy and joyful message. It is a message of joy for all people. In Luke's Gospel, we were reminded that God uses whatever means He desires to get His message of joy out to all the people. The first thing we read about is that God used a sovereign or a king or a ruler to get His message out. It may not seem like it, but this is what He did. We read in Luke chapter 2, beginning in verse 1, in those days Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place when Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to his own town to register. Now, pause here a moment and to take and notice a few things. First of all, we notice that God is working in the affairs of men, or in human race, if you will. In this passage, Luke intends to set this event in a historical setting. In other words, it wasn't made up. It actually happened during a time of history in mankind's history. Luke is telling us that the events surrounding the birth of Jesus actually took place at a particular time during the course of human history. In other words, he's describing what actually happened, what actually took place. It's a historical fact. It isn't something he just made up. The mention of Caesar Augustus may not only be a part of the historical background, but it also was told to contrast the human with the divine decrees. Augustus Caesar was ruling the land at the time and decided to call a census to be taken. He's calling people to be counted. Now, where he come up with this idea, who knows why? But evidently, maybe he wanted to tax people again, okay? Wanted to find out how many people was in this country. But like many politicians, he was probably interested in just taxing so he could get more money for his government, right? What is interesting is that Caesar is the one that called the census to be taken, but it was God who used Caesar's edict to move Mary and Joseph some 80 miles from Nazareth to Bethlehem to fulfill His word. Okay? I believe that it was God that put it in the mind of Caesar to come up with the idea of taking a census. See, Augustus Caesar was ruling, but God was in charge, as He is today. Psalms 33 and verse 10 through 11 says, we read that in the New Living Translation of the Bible says that God shatters the plans of the nation and thwarts all their schemes. But the Lord's plans are still stand firm forever. His intentions can never be shaken. In other words, what God sets in mind, what He plans to do, He's going to do, regardless of what man tries to do. Many are the plans in man's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. Nothing can stop the plan that God puts into action. In other words, what God plans, He carries out no matter what mankind tries to do to thwart that plan. You can never change. No decision in man's affair can make the difference or impede God's plan. No opposition can defeat it. No progress can supersede it either. In verse 4 we read, so Joseph went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea to Bethlehem to the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him, and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. Well, in these verses we see the promise of his coming. In other words, it had been prophesied a long time ago, before it ever happened. We see the promises of God coming true. We read that Joseph and Mary traveled to Bethlehem, and there the child is born. And again, this event surrounding the birth of Jesus is one that we're all familiar with. The story is the long-awaited Messiah has been born in the town of Bethlehem. And all through the Old Testament we find prophecy after prophecy that proclaimed that the Messiah would come and that he would be born in Bethlehem. We read in Isaiah chapter 7 and verse 14, therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will be with a child and will give birth to a son, and we'll call him Emmanuel. And what is Emmanuel? It means God with you, right? God with you. Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 6 through 7 we read, for to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. See, the prophecies are coming true whenever Jesus was born in Bethlehem. We also read in Micah chapter 5 and verse 2, but you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are of old, from ancient times. And of course the one that came out of them was Jesus, right? Micah declared that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem, and this promise was given 700 years before the birth of Jesus Christ, and even told where he was going to be born at. And that's quite a prophecy. I mean, we have people making predictions all the time today, and still they don't come true, right? We just saw that. Just had that happen. Warren Wiersbe in his commentary writes, saying, Bethlehem means house of bread. It was the ideal birthplace for the bread of life. Its rich historic heritage included the death of Rachel and the birth of Benjamin, the marriage of Ruth, and the exploits of David. It is worth noting that the name Benjamin means son of my right hand, and the name David means beloved. Both of these names apply to our Lord, for he is the beloved son at the right hand of God.